Hey guys, Chris here with Work to Game, and it is finally time that I can talk about the mess that I have been leaving in the back of videos for what feels like forever. I am actually starting to build a new list for me. It's models that I have bits of, or I have just recently come into bits of through some chances to buy some really cheap kind of bulk of sprue from some people. And so I am building a new list, and I want to build it here on channel. And so I'm kind of debating how best to do that, but I am just going to kind of show my thought process in how I build my models. So I have a list in place. I have proxied it several times. I like the way it plays. It's not perfect. I'll be talking a little bit about that list composition and stuff in some future videos. But today, let's talk a little bit about how you plan on building. And the first thing I do is I look at the order I want to build them in. The goal is to build all of them. And really, I am trying to get to the point where I am proxying appropriately sized models by Christmas. So anywhere that I already have an infantry model, I'm not worried about building the right infantry. I'm not worried about what they call WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. So I'm not worried about them being equipped correctly. I'm worried about having the appropriate number of models to play games when my brothers are in town for Christmas. And so I have to look at the models I don't have. And this is a biker list, and I'm running a couple of Mauler Fiends in it because they're super fun. I am a Chaos Space Marine player. Mauler Fiends are like these big demon dogs, and we'll show those here. And so I need to build the bikes, and I need to build the Mauler Fiends. The Mauler Fiends first, because I actually have some old Warhammer fantasy horses around that can proxy as bikes. They're appropriate size when looking at line of sight and things like that, so they're close enough. I also have a handful of Space Marine bikes that are laying around as ways to run smaller squads or to show which one's kind of the leader. I'll put him on a bike and he'll run with a group of horses, etc. So I think that the first thing I do is I make sure I have everything. And so especially if you're proxying or you're buying in bits or you're buying off eBay, you want to go ahead and get everything off sprue and get a feel that you have all the parts you need. And the reason for this is sometimes you may find that you can move those parts around and be more efficient with it, or you can realize, okay, if I just magnetized this piece, I'd be able to double up on this, and I'd have the flexibility to run two different lists. And so it gives you a better feel for where you need to have flexibility. The next thing I do is I make sure that I have all of my bases, because now that I have all of my sprue, I may not have enough bases, especially if you've been buying things not in boxes. If you've been buying things in boxes, odds are you're fine, unless you're combining the extra bits that come in boxes somehow to make some extra magic model. Usually GW is good about shorting you one part. Like you might have 3 extra legs, 20 extra arms, a handful of extra heads, and no torsos. And so then you can't build it. And that's a good time to look on eBay and see if you can order torsos. Because sometimes somebody else needed some of the arms or something like that. And so some of these bit sellers and stuff can kind of hook you up there. There's also a third party. Maybe it's a good excuse to have some custom torsos. And so when I'm basing, the one thing I consider is what the long-term goal of the base is going to be. Okay, so a lot of guys, and this is just a primed one that came out of a bits bin, just glue it to the plastic and prime it. And that's fine. And later you can do things like a Grelin earth or some really good job painting or some tufts of grass, and you can have a really nice looking base. But you need to know that that's what you want now, because otherwise you have to somehow break this guy off of here, and you risk damaging the base, you risk damaging the figure. And so if you would just plan ahead a little bit, then you can actually know that, for example, I am running a chapter of Chaos Space Marines that until recently was very little documented. I don't actually like that GW gave me more documentation, because it means that I feel a little bit of pressure to use more of their color scheme, but we'll talk about that some other time. So I want them all on these like magma rocks. And so the two things that painters and painting blogs have always kind of told me that I picked up on is faces and bases. If you're going to spend extra time on anything, spend extra time on the base, spend extra time on the face. That's what people notice. The rest of it can really be tabletop quality, and your army as a whole will look very, very good. So I go ahead and use corkboard. Now, see if we can get this guy to focus. That corkboard makes a huge difference. So what you do is I'll actually prime the whole model, and then when I get done with the model, now I can paint that corkboard. And what it ends up looking like is this. Now I'm looking at doing this paint scheme a little differently. This is a very old paint job of mine, but ultimately, that's the idea, is you take this cork, and as long as I do that now, it's very easy to know if I'm going to need to pin the model, especially if you have a lot of weight. The cork can break, and so a lot of times I'll run pins all the way through. I didn't with this particular model because I wasn't worried about it. It's very light, but when I start to have especially pewter or a model that's going to get handled a lot or has a lot of loose limbs that you're worried about getting knocked over or anything like that, tipping, you may want to talk about pinning. And so by planning ahead, I know where I need to do magnets, and I know where I need to do bases. And I'll do these bases in bulk. And so what I actually have in one of my drawers behind me is I have cork, and I just buy it at my local hobby store, and I buy it by the sheet. And it comes in actually packs of sheets, no big deal. And you can buy different width, different depths, different densities, depending on the kind of rock you're trying to emulate. You could use the cork off of wine bottles. Those grains tend to be a little big for me. These are nice and medium. There's also fine grain ones, especially as you talk about model railroading supplies. So if you want more of maybe like a, I think like Braveheart type look. And so then I will actually glue those to a whole bunch of bases at once. And that is what's been going on behind me, is that I have actually laid all of my bases out underneath here, and I've begun separating sprue into what each bike is going to take, because I want to do a lot of heavy converting, and making sure that I have the appropriate number of bases and that I have corked them all. Now, when I am building a very small, specific model count, like my Mauler Fiend, which I am in the middle of on that messy desk back there, I'm taking breaks from each, to each their own method. The way that Mauler Fiend sits, I need to plan on the cork after I've built the model. So I'm building the model, and then I'll build the cork to fit. With bikes, however, I'm building such a large number of them, I'll go ahead and cork these now, and then as I build each bike, I'll go ahead and get them set to an appropriate base, and then I may save a handful of bases that I either didn't cork, which I have extras, or as I get down to those last few, I'll be very careful how I build the bikes, the way his foot leans and things like that, now knowing that, okay, I'm down to these 5 bases and I need to design a bike that fits that. And so that is just the first step. So if you guys want to build an army along with me, the first thing you need to do is you need to acquire the appropriate number of models, either partially built, not built at all, brand new, used, doesn't matter, on sprue, and you need to get them cleaned of any paint that may be on them. You need to get them off of sprue, or at least have the right number of sprues available, and you need to get your bases, and you need to know what your paint scheme is. You need to know what kind of basing style you want long term, and you need to take a hard look at the lists you might run, not just the one you're running right now, and look at anything that you may want to magnetize or have options for. If a model has multiple war gear layouts, you really want to have the option, if possible, to decide later if, say all of a sudden plasma guns are really good, and so right now you're like, I would never run that guy with a plasma gun. He's always a melt-a-gun. And then you decide to switch, now you have to build a whole new model, and you have to pay for a whole new model. And so I would recommend planning ahead. So go ahead, follow along with me. This first week, we are just doing bases. Next week, I'll talk a little bit about how I'm getting these off sprue and the prep steps, and we'll follow through as I build my army over the next several weeks. This has been Chris with Work to Game. If you guys have any hobby posts that you can link down in the comments below, I would love to see what you're working on. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Hey, it's me. I'm in Chris's office. He doesn't know it, but we've got other videos for you to check out right here. And we've got the vlog down there in the corner. Plus, we've got some contact information, and you can totally subscribe to the channel that way as well. So we hope you do. We hope to see you in our next video. But until then, take care.